we invite you to check out our online clothing store, where we also offer customization. The link is in the video description. It will be a pleasure to have you visit. After reading news about foreign countries, I remembered an interesting episode that I would like to share with you. Recently, the American delegation that went to Venezuela for negotiations returned without success. State Department and U.S. Congress representatives in Caracas sought to resolve the issue of heavy oil supply, which had previously been blocked to Venezuela by the Americans themselves, who also tried to oust President Maduro. Now U.S. representatives in Caracas are trying retaliation, seeking to undermine Russia's support for Venezuela. They met with Vice President Delcy and President Maduro, whom they have denied legitimacy in recent years by supporting. 1. Representatives of the United States, including one who leads one of the country's security councils, suggested some relaxation of sanctions to Caracas. For example, it was proposed that Venezuela could sell oil through Western companies. In return, President Maduro imposed his own conditions, which the American press considers impossible to be met. Initially, all conditions are considered impossible by them. The President of Venezuela responded to the United States that Washington needs, above all, to remove all official sanctions against Caracas and revoke the restrictions imposed on each sanctioned official. In addition, according to Maduro, the U.S. should start by returning full control of the Venezuelan state company to Caracas, an action taken by the Americans years ago. In this scenario, Maduro criticized the sanctions applied to Russia, calling them harmful to the Russian people. He also mentioned, currently, the US has started an intense information war against Russia. We are aware of that. Despite the withdrawal of American negotiators, they stated that they could return soon for new rounds of negotiations. Here is what the Americans have to say. The Venezuelan authorities did not understand. Until recently, in Washington, they didn't even talk about Venezuelan authorities. Completely illegal regime. It's good to keep an eye out. Until the beginning of 2016, Rosneft and a Venezuelan company controlled by Americans worked together on 5 joint oil production projects in Venezuela. The data presented by PJ/CNK Rosneft states that 5 oil projects in which the Russian company is involved have total reserves of 80 million tons, with an annual production of 3,400,000 tons. Rosneft's participation was considered in both situations. In addition, the company has a gas development project in the Pat-2, Male Ones, and Rio Carib deposits, with geological reserves totaling 180 billion cubic meters. Subtitled by Nitorzak. Are you following along? Rosneft was operating in oil exploration in Venezuela. Correct. I mean, it was like that until 2020, when the situation got even more complicated, especially for the Americans. Follow the unfolding of the story. On March 28, 2020, PJ/CNK Rosneft, based in Moscow, announced the interruption of its activities in Venezuela and the sale of assets related to the country. Rosneft has signed an agreement with a company wholly owned by the Russian government to sell its stakes and cease its activities in all projects in Venezuela, including stakes in extraction companies, oil refineries, and commercial operations. Under the terms of the agreement, all assets and commercial operations of Rosneft in the oil and gas sector in Venezuela or related to this country will be divested, terminated, or liquidated. Subtitle Editor A. Semkin and Reviewer A. Igorova highlight that the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela holds the world's largest oil reserves, making it a highly promising resource base in the oil industry. Furthermore, it is mentioned that most of Rosneft's projects in Venezuela, now under the control of the government of the Russian Federation, are focused on the extraction of heavy hydrocarbons that are difficult to access, using advanced technologies. The projects involve collaborations with Venezuela's state oil and gas company. However, there is much more to consider. It may ironically be suggested that perhaps they should have gone to negotiate in Moscow instead of Caracas. It is relevant to emphasize that they did not need to try to influence politics in Venezuela, but rather to develop partnerships. Without humor or sarcasm, one can consider Russia to have carefully prepared for current events. In the near future, we may learn a lot from these developments. It is conceivable that the US would accept Caracas conditions, lift sanctions, and begin acquiring oil from Venezuela. Only Venezuela is of origin, but will be sold by Russia. Negotiations with Russia are also necessary. Furthermore, according to the Wall Street Journal, the leaders of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia declined to negotiate by phone with Joe Biden. The leaders of two Middle Eastern countries refused to engage in dialogue with Biden about the situation surrounding Ukraine and the possibility of increasing oil production to lower global prices. An American official said there were expectations of a phone call between Biden and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia to discuss increasing oil production due to rising energy prices amid Western countries' sanctions against Russia. But the call did not take place. The Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, also chose not to make phone calls, in a similar move to leaders of other Middle Eastern countries who recently refrained from contacting the White House. Coincidentally, both ended up making calls to Vladimir Putin. Thank you, friends, for watching. Don't forget to share your opinions in the comments. What do you think about the subject?